Let's try a little experiment right now. In your head, I want you to yell the sentence, "I like crickets." Don't say it out loud, just keep it in your head. Now, do the exact same thing, but this time, instead of yelling, whisper, "I like crickets," in your mind. Did the actual volume of that inner voice change when you yelled versus when you whispered? For most people, the volume stays the same, even if the pitch or tone seems to shift. This is because you aren't actually hearing that voice at all. Your inner voice lives in a completely different part of the brain than your ears. It feels like you are hearing yourself think, but there are no actual sound waves hitting your eardrums. It is more of an auditory ghost than a physical reality. If you are a verbal thinker, you might assume everyone has a narrator running a constant play-by-play of their life, but that is far from the truth. A vast majority of people do report thinking in whole sentences when they are specifically reading or writing, but their daily, pristine experience is often much more chaotic. When you are just going about your day, you might not think in words at all. Instead, you might process the world through pictures, actions, or raw images. Scientists have identified 3 major types of thinkers to help categorize this internal diversity. There are the verbal thinkers who live in a world of words. Then there are the pattern thinkers who navigate through connections, which often feels like a sequence of actions or emotions. Finally, there are the visual thinkers who see the world in high-definition mental pictures. Most of us are likely a blend of all 3, but for some, one operating system is significantly more dominant than the others. The mystery of whether you hear a thought gets even stranger when you look at how the brain processes dialogue. Studies using fMRI scanners have shown that when you read a sentence that includes characters speaking, like Beatrice said, "I like crickets," parts of your auditory cortex actually activate. This means you are physically simulating the act of hearing what the characters are saying. This is different from a standard inner monologue, which typically does not activate the hearing parts of your brain. However, the moment you imagine a conversation or replay an old argument in your head, those auditory circuits light up. Your brain is literally making a prediction about what it is about to hear, activating the same sensory parts of the brain used for real-life noise. This internal voice is not a one-size-fits-all experience. Some people read in their heads using their own voice exclusively. Others might hear a completely different voice with a specific gender, pitch, or accent that is not their own. Some people even experience multiple voices or no voice at all while reading. Because we cannot see or hear what is happening inside another person's mind, we often walk around assuming our own internal reality is the universal standard. But researchers have spent decades proving that our minds are far more diverse than we imagine. Using a method called descriptive experience sampling, where a beeper goes off randomly to catch a snapshot of a thought, researchers have found that people only have an inner voice about a quarter of the time on average. If you don't have a constant voice, you might be part of the significant portion of the population that thinks in what is called unsymbolized thinking. This is the direct experience of a thought where you know exactly what you are thinking about, but there are no words or images present to carry it. Imagine deciding whether you want a hot dog or a hamburger for lunch. You might recognize the choice and make the decision without ever mentally saying the words hot dog or seeing a picture of one. It is a pure, wordless comprehension. Others might experience sensory awareness, where they are drawn to the gold glint of a doorknob, not for its use, but simply for the raw, sensory quality of the color itself. Let's try another interactive test, often called the apple test. Close your eyes and try to picture a red apple. Some of you will see a crisp 3D fruit with perfect textures and shadows that you can rotate in your mind. Others might only see a faint, low-resolution silhouette or a dim impression, and a small portion of you will see absolutely nothing but blackness. This complete absence of internal imagery is known as aphantasia. Many people with aphantasia don't even realize they are different until they're in their adulthood because they assume "picture this" is just a metaphor. On the opposite end of the spectrum are hyper-fantastic visual thinkers who see mental images so vivid they seem as real as actual sight. For these individuals, trying to understand someone who thinks primarily in words is like trying to understand an alien. These differences in how we think can lead to major communication gaps in our daily lives. You might be giving someone directions using a linear, verbal list of streets while their brain is screaming for a visual map. Teachers might explain concepts through sentences, while a student's brain is trying to process the information spatially. We think we are speaking the same language, but we are often using entirely different internal operating systems. Even our emotions are processed differently. Some people label their feelings with words like anxious or excited, while others experience emotions as physical waves that wash over them without any verbal narrative attached. Our internal worlds become even more mysterious when we go to sleep. Science still struggles to explain why we dream, often viewing it as either a primary function or an epiphenomenon, a kind of mental collateral damage. One theory suggests that dreams are an evolutionary threat simulator designed to prepare us for anxiety and danger in the real world by letting us practice in a safe environment. Another theory posits that as the brain sorts through memories and throws out useless data, the conscious mind tries to make sense of the resulting electrical noise by weaving it into a hallucinated bedtime story. Regardless of why they happen, dreams can be incredibly practical. In the 19th century, an inventor named Elias Howe was struggling to design a sewing machine. He had a nightmare about being attacked by cannibals with spears that had holes near the tips. When he woke up, he realized that moving the hole to the point of the needle rather than the back as was traditional for hand sewing was the mechanical key he had been looking for. His brain solved a complex engineering problem through a bizarre, frightening vision. This suggests that our subconscious is constantly working, often using a completely different language of symbols and images than our waking mind. If you find your own internal monologue is a bit too loud or unorganized, you can actually train your brain to use different systems. Memory athletes use the loci method, also known as a memory palace, to turn abstract information into a visual route. By mentally placing items you want to remember in specific corners of a familiar building, like your apartment, you can increase your recall significantly. You're essentially forcing your verbal brain to work with your spatial and visual brain. This technique is so effective that it can give almost anyone the appearance of a photographic memory with enough practice. We spend nearly half of our waking hours thinking about things that aren't actually happening right in front of us. That means for almost half of your life, you are living entirely inside your own mind. Your brain generates thousands of thoughts every single day, most of which are just tiny flashes or fragments that disappear before you even notice them. Only a small fraction of these thoughts ever show up as the words or narration we identify as our self. Whether you hear a constant whisper, see a silent movie, or feel the world through raw emotional pulls, your experience of consciousness is completely unique. Every person you pass on the street is a whole universe of their own, navigating the world with an internal reality that you will never truly know. You can describe your thoughts and approximate your feelings to others, but the actual lived experience of your mind belongs to you alone. It is a silent symphony that plays only for one listener. So the next time you think to yourself, remember that the voice you hear is just one way of being human. What you are experiencing isn't just a whisper, it's the fingerprint of your own private reality.